Josh, and welcome to Shift+F1, a podcast about speedy race cars. That, by the way, is French. Le Drache. Though specific to the Belgian French community. For heavy rain, which, fingers crossed, we may see this weekend. Hopefully not as much as we saw in 2021, where there basically was not a race. I'm Drew Scanlon. Joining me, Danny O'Dwyer. How are you, Danny?
I'm very impressed that the Belgian people they invented their very own word for David Cage's magnum opus. Really terrific, seminal moment in the lives of every gamer around the world, and apparently no more so than Belgium.
Also joining us, Rob Zackin. How are you, Rob?
Doing good. Just thinking about various heavy rain clips that sometimes get recycled and, just remind you of the absurdity of how that game was taken super seriously for a year because we hadn't really gotten the load of like what David Cage's whole oeuvre was going to be about. Like, it was like, oh, this is just it. This is all there is.
I think he had an unbroken record of every single one of his games had a quick time event sex scene in it, until Detroit Become Human. I'm not sure if that one does. I was racking through my my lexicon of F1 drivers looking for a Jason, and I haven't come up with one. So if you know, shiftf1podcast@gmail.com. Jensen could work.
There you go. Nice. There it was. All right. If you're new to this podcast, a very warm welcome to you. And if you are new to Formula One itself, we recommend listening to our preseason primer episode, which assumes no prior F1 knowledge and explains how the sport works and who everybody is. So if you'd like to go back and listen to that, it's episode 257. Also, this show would not be possible without our audience over at patreon.com/shiftf1, where every month we release an ad-free version of the podcast, along with bonus podcasts and videos exclusively for our patrons that cover racing documentaries and films, F1 video games, experiments with other racing series, and a lot of weird things. So if you would like to support the show and get access to all that fun stuff, head over to patreon.com/shiftf1 or click the link in the show notes. What's going on this month, Danny?
Tomorrow, as the time of this recording, we will be recording our second episode about Overtake, the incredible Japanese Formula 4, right? I think.
Yes.
Anime that we have been enjoying that really won us over. We just kind of did it for a lark. Let's do 2 episodes, and then all of you guys watched way more of them, and then we're like, let's keep going. Let's just finish out this thing, because it's a genuinely really good piece of storytelling around open wheel racing. And a massive thanks, of course, to all of our incredible title sponsors: Get Rich, Die Ryan. Now I can't say it the other way. Agave ATX, Cypress Training, Turf SCS, @Team Blackjack, Michael Maves, Gordy's Army, @Talking Autos, Olivia Evans, telemetrydeck.com, FTC, Drew Stewart, Bailey Foot, Abdullah Al-Thani, Jason Chadwick, Abraham Getchell, The Space Above Us Podcast, Buddy Fiend, Snigs, Alex Goucher, Max Voltar, Circuit Demon, Troy Stammer, William Rumpf, Irvine Clinical Research, Lachlan the Maddened Man, Samurai Love Story, and of course, Jason Kelly. There you go. Our F1 drivers, they let us down. But thanks to our title sponsors, we had ample time to make way more David Cage related puns, and that is now the end of them for this episode.
For now. Because light rain, not heavy rain,
yes,
did rear its head in qualifying for the Hungarian Grand Prix, which made it a pretty fun session. Perez found the wall as a result. Yeah, exactly. Not so fun for him. Yeah. He went out in Q1 as a result. We had, though, at the end of it, the first McLaren front row lockout since 2012. Yeah. Lando Norris on pole, Oscar Piastri starting second.
Yeah, really exciting. Each sector of qualifying was exciting in its own way, and you know that like last minute rush to get the good times right at the end. Obviously that sort of didn't happen because we had was it Yuki's red flag happened with 2 minutes to go in Q3, I think?
In Q3, that's correct.
Yeah, so they and I think the McLarens went out, but Max didn't even bother, and the McLarens either didn't have the, maybe the track was just cooled down too much, or the tires were wrong, and nobody improved on their times. But Yuki's crash was, Perez's was a real, I don't know, he got a bit too much curb, and maybe it was wet, I don't know, but it was sort of a tricky one. Yuki's one was because of the new edges runoff they've been doing, where they put grass down there. There wasn't grass there before, and he went off with 2 wheels, but it was just that when he turned back in, he basically caught, like, the grass, probably the nature of this new grass as well, that he basically caught an edge, and it just like pushed the rest of his car further into the grass, and then he just went airborne, basically.
It launched him. It's really a weird looking crash.
We're not used to ones like that, and I think it's because of I wonder if there'll be a little Jolyon Palmer video around it at all. He'll bring it up, but it seems to be because of the nature of the grass and how it sort of it basically sort of levered the car up when he went to turn. But it could have been a lot worse. He got a lot of air, but thankfully, because like the catch fence there isn't exactly the thickest either, and he's hitting at an angle which isn't great, and the spectators are right there, and so thankfully he was fine. But
I didn't check before the race. What was the condition of his car? Because the second thing I thought after like he was okay was, well, they basically dropped the car. It's like dropping the car off the jacks, right? It's like it just dropped 2 feet. Gear, you immediately think like gearbox, suspension, what
floor.
How is that going to pass inspection?
Yeah, I wonder because the back of the car, I think, it hit the catch fence. I think it was his rear left that came off entirely. Like that was like 200 feet down the road from him. But it did look like he had a bit of a tank slapper kind of, the back of the car kind of went out and hit the fence. But it was obviously destroyed for the rest of quali, but they got him back for the race.
They sure did. The grass patch that he hit was replaced by gravel for the race.
Funny.
Yeah.
I guess you can't replace it with grass. Like, it's like, put down some AstroTurf, it's just going to come up again.
Right. And his crash did interrupt the laps of Alonso and Ricciardo, who were also in Q3. But as you mentioned, Denny, no one was subsequently able to set good times. So let me just run down the rest of the grid here. Lando on top, Oscar second. Then we got Max Verstappen third, Carlos Sainz fourth, Lewis Hamilton in fifth. Made it through to Q3 by 1/100th of a second. It was almost Hülkenberg into Q3 instead of Hamilton. Charles Leclerc sixth. He had a heavy crash in free practice 2, but managed to pull it together for qualifying. Then we got Fernando Alonso, Lance Stroll, Daniel Ricciardo, and Yuki Tsunoda in 10th. Behind them, Nico Hülkenberg, Valtteri Bottas, Alex Albon in 13th, Logan Sargent, and then Kevin Magnussen lining up 15th. Sergio Perez will start 16th after founding the wall in Q1. And then George Russell in 17th. That Q1 session, some serious track evolution was happening with the rain easing up. But that saw Russell left in the pits while he got knocked out by the former Mercedes driver, Valtteri Bottas. Russell was unable to do another lap because he had run out of fuel.
Oh, wow.
So he after the session sort of blamed himself and Mercedes, saying like, I should have set a better time, but also we ran out of fuel. Zhou Guanyu 18th, Esteban Ocon 19th, and Pierre Gasly starting from the pit lane after he used some more power unit parts. Boy, there's some big bullet points in this race. Danny, do you want to take us through the first one, the start?
Yeah, absolutely, yes. The first talking point of many. Lights out. Both McLarens have a good start, but Piastri has a better start in the second phase. And basically, the three of them are 3 abreast going into the first turn. Piastri has the inside line, which is favorable on the right-hander. Lando is in the middle, and Verstappen is on the outside. Unsurprisingly, Piastri takes a defensive angle into this turn. It's basically almost like a 180, this turn anyway. So he drifts a little bit wide. So as such, Lando also has to drift a little bit wide. And then there's basically no more room for Max to drive around the outside of Lando, which is some typical first lap stuff. But as we have talked about in recent podcasts, Max, what happened basically in Austria, where Lando essentially took the racing line. There wasn't much space left for Max, so Max very early decided, well, fuck this, I'm just going to drive as fast as I can off the track and drive back on again. That's what he does again. He decides very early in the turn that, the alternative is that he's going to have to brake and maybe lose even more positions. But he slams on the gas, drives off the track, which you're not allowed to do. People who are new to F1 should know you're supposed to drive on the track. If you drive off the track, that's not fair because you can gain an advantage perhaps. And obviously he does. Hamilton actually, in the meantime, just pips ahead of Lando Norris as they're entering turn 3. Verstappen is now in second place, quite far down the track actually. Lando's kind of struggled, I think, on the exit of turn 1 to get a bit of traction. But he has a better line through turn 3 and manages to get past Hamilton on the outside of turn 4. Great little overtake there.
The reason Hamilton can't maintain that position is because Verstappen cuts him off, and he has to brake really hard.
Oh, does he?
Like
on turn
this
3?
is where I think they blew it again with how they handled this, because it was, first of all, body of work thing. It's Max doing the off the track thing again, being like, fuck it, I'll just floor it.
Oh, he did.
And, hold position. Totally balks Lewis. So later their solution in a lap or two is going to be, we think you should give the position back to Norris. Yeah, no shit, you should give the position back to Norris. But the other driver who was disadvantaged by this was Hamilton.
Right.
Who had not been involved in the incident at all, but had a pretty clean run on both, on Norris, and should have been past Max. Max forces Hamilton to slow way up. Hamilton drops back behind Norris. And so, from my perspective, yet again, it was sort of an open and shut thing with Max going off the track and not yielding a position. And the stewards don't do anything. And then they allow Red Bull to set its punishment, which was let's give back that one position.
Yeah.
And not arguably the two that we protected by doing that.
Or even in the moment, he would have had to have, if Lando hadn't gone past Hamilton, he would have had to have given up the two positions in that moment. It's going to be the conversation at the podcast, and unfortunately, it is often the conversation when we talk about Max and his racecraft when it comes to overtaking. But one of the things that Red Bull are maybe tactically good at, even though I think it's very unsporting, is kind of what Rob was talking about there, which is essentially putting it in the hands of the courts, because the courts in F1 are actually pretty lenient. They tend to not give crazy punishments for on-track
Well, especially if
action.
you're willing to set your own punishment. If you're willing to be like, well, yeah, you know what, we will give that position back. When what should be at issue is not just one position. We don't want to litigate what happens on the racetrack too much. So what fine do you feel is right? What punishment do you feel is just?
Right, yeah.
And so you end up with this.
I did want to shout out also the soft tire runners here. By the end of lap 1, Albon, who started in 13th, has jumped 4 places to 9th, and Magnussen 5 places to 10th place. Alonso also got by Sainz initially, also on soft tires, but Sainz did get him back on lap 3 with DRS down the inside of turn 1. As you mentioned, both of you, Verstappen does give second place back to Norris on lap 4, albeit with some testy words over the radio, which is only the start of a lengthy dialogue between Verstappen and his engineer.
He was
Giampiero.
Unbearable. On the radio. Yeah. It was just from the start, it was like somebody being cut off by the bartender. That is the vibe. So when they tell me to give the place back, okay, so you just run people off the track then. You can tell the FIA that's how we're going to race from now onwards. Just drive people off the track.
I don't like having to constantly say how much Max is annoying. I really don't. I remember at the start of the season being like, he's being magnanimous now. This is great. I like this version of Max. He's won a bunch of championships. He's late stage Vettel now. He's I've proved my point. I'm really good. But I don't know what has happened But this race weekend especially, I guess he's not winning anymore. Is that what it is? Is that just what it is?
The ounce of pressure he is under. It's not good. It's like this. Look, we're gonna go in on Max this episode for sure because like it's not. He does not cover himself in glory. But the thing I'll preface all that with is sometimes you have a shitty day. And the vibes are off, and people are just short-tempered. Like, it was like that from the start. The car setup never
Car's
came
not
together.
working, right? Upgrades, he's not liking. It's got way too much understeer, which he, in particular, does not like. So...
Well, to hear David Croft tell it, it was really because he was on iRacing the night before.
And
Crofty
the morning.
not letting that shit go was just...
And the morning.
God.
Yeah.
Okay. That killed me because... He's been doing this all season, so it was like when he does it and wins, everyone's like, "Max, he's just a racing machine. Just loves to race. Can't get enough of it. What a competitor!" Has one day, and Croft decides that like Max just needs a firm talking to.
Yeah,
I'm gonna daddy that boy. And the other thing is, it also dovetails with a thing that bugs me about Crofty's commentary. And Dan, you can tell me if I'm sort of reading this correctly, but there's sort of Crofty is sort of the British commentator that's like, I stand for the everyman. I represent like good, hardworking values. And I give voice to that sort of perspective on sport. And so he looks at this and he relates to, I think Max should have just been more responsible and not played those video games and gone to bed early and gotten a good night's sleep. And it's like, people who don't have talent will always be like, well, maybe somebody just should have worked harder and taken it more seriously, the way I do. And it's like, no, you have to do those things because you're not very, like, there's nothing that is really high performance that you're, like, good at. And it's kind of foreign to you, the experience of, like, I wake up and I'm not Max Verstappen. There is no one-to-one, like, there is nothing I'm the Max Verstappen of. So I can't really relate to what it's like to be Max Verstappen. And so I don't think the little observations I would have about, like, I don't know, maybe he should have just gotten to bed early. It's the same way people were like, is Lewis Hamilton partying too hard?
Right.
Yeah, I'm sure it's that, and not the fact that McLaren's car went to shit immediately after his championship.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of, there's like an era of commentator that were sort of... that I kind of think a lot of our favorite commentators are these, like Murray Walker, I think to a certain degree is this, and like a lot of my favorite like soccer commentators and probably football commentators you guys listen to over the years are where they come from like the world that I used to be in, of broadcasting, right? Where they're broadcasters and they have knowledge about the sport, but from a broadcaster's perspective, not as somebody who participated in it. Mm-hmm. And the one that I always go back to, because he was somebody who I thought was completely fine when I didn't really know that much about the sport, but now when I go back and listen to it, I'm like, oh, no wonder they swapped him out, is Mike Goldberg for the UFC. He is very much in this sort of... Crofty's not as bad. I think I like Crofty generally, but every once in a while he does this thing where the limits of his knowledge are really obvious and you can tell he's looking at his notes. You know what I mean? And Goldberg does that all the time. Like now when I go back and listen to Goldberg, I'm like, oh, he's just like reading random things off his notes, or he's saying things about how this guy's doing uppercuts or things that like are kind of bad reads, you know what I mean? And then they need an expert next to him, like an ex-UFC fighter or something to I mean, in that case it was Rogan, who never fought professionally, I don't think, but at least had some experience with jiu-jitsu. But it was that type of thing. And that's how they sort of do a lot of this, right? Is you got your color commentator in this case, who's like Brundle, who knows what he's talking about, and then Crofty is that way. But I also found that to be a little bit, it didn't stand up. And I forget who it was who came on. Ted. He was talking to, was it Kravitz, I think, in the pits, was like, well, last time he did this, he won. So,
right.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, just one last thing about the start. I have a question for y'all. Does the cutting your teammate off thing, if you're 1-2, front row lockout, does the I'm going to really aggressively cut my teammate off thing, does it feel like that always ends up making you look like a chump?
You mean Piastri?
Norris sweeping across to cut off Piastri at the start.
Oh, sorry. Right at the start on the straight. I don't know. I think you got to be aggressive on at the start of a race. It's like the whole racing incident thing on the first half of a lap. Like, I'm all right with it.
I think even if it's like a perfunctory,
Yeah.
performance, I think you still do have to do it.
I always feel like it just opens the door a lot for someone in the second row to come bring the fight to both of you. That's where I tend to it tends to be the like, I'm going to set a tone here with my teammate who's probably not on the preferred line, though Hungary's a bit of a weird start, but like it always feels to me like so often you see someone from the second row just pull up now because they got this beautiful clear space to move out of the draft into.
I guess in a lot of races, being in front of your teammate is often more important because you tend to get pit strategy. Although in this race, we'll cross that bridge.
Yeah. Lap 17 is when the key pit stops start happening, with Hamilton pitting from fourth, going from medium to hard. Norris comes in on the next lap, followed then by Piastri. Verstappen, though, pits for his hard tires 5 laps after Hamilton, by which point Hamilton has thoroughly undercut him. So Verstappen exits the pits in fifth, 6 seconds behind Hamilton, which becomes fourth place once Leclerc finally pits from the lead a few laps later. Lap 33, Piastri is enjoying a comfortable lead over Norris until he takes a brief trip off the road at turn 11, bringing the gap down to about 2 seconds. By lap 35, Verstappen on those newer tires has caught Hamilton and starts attacking first with DRS into turn 1, which Hamilton locks up, defending.
Yeah, a little bit.
This allows Verstappen to pull up around the outside of turn 2, a move we've seen him make many times in prior races. But while he does pull ahead, he then goes wide and allows Hamilton to retake third place. And this is where we get a lot of complaints of understeer and things going wrong with the car.
He hates understeer, and like you could tell, like that Red Bull doesn't do that very often. Like in previous races or previous years, even it makes those turns, and I think this is a particular grievance of his. And it's a bad place to lose it because then you kind of need speed getting out of that turn for the next like 3 or 4 turns. So Hamilton sort of disappears down the road a bit.
Yeah. He then pits, Hamilton does, for another set of hard tires on lap 41, meaning that he will have to nurse them for 30 laps until the finish. Red Bull, though, leaves Verstappen out again, intending to put him on mediums later. But most importantly, McLaren is worried about Hamilton undercutting Norris, who's just in front of him in second place. So normally, when teammates are running back-to-back like Piastri and Norris are, the team will pit the car in front first so that there's no danger of undercutting themselves. But because Hamilton has forced McLaren's hand, they now have to pit Norris first to prevent him losing a place to Hamilton. But in so doing, that also undercuts Piastri, who comes out when he finally pits behind Norris on lap 48. Yes. Danny, what do you think of all this?
So the word need, they felt like they needed to pit Norris, right? Because they were worried about Hamilton. They were worried about a bad pit stop. What they were worried about was like a really bad pit stop, not like a 3.5 second pit stop. Because by the time Norris gets out of the pits, Hamilton hasn't made it onto the straight yet. Like, he's still rounding the final turn. There is a sizable time difference between the two of them. So they're worried about something really bad happening. So this seemed overly defensive. And obviously, it shouldn't really matter. We don't really see this very often. Like, it's quite a rare thing to do, to be so concerned about an undercut from a rival. That you know, and also the McLaren is performing better than Hamilton. They're, like, by the time they do the pits, they're like quite far ahead. So it seems quite defensive, kind of like what we'd see with Ferrari some years, where they're in the fight at the top and they make these sort of overly weighted decisions, which maybe
the prevent defense.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So obviously we're talking about benefit of hindsight here and what happens next, but it did seem like peculiar in a way, like why they were bringing in Norris.
Yeah, Piastri also on exit drops a wheel onto the gravel, which does not help his gap to Norris. He does get a radio explanation telling him why Norris is ahead and that, quote, we'll manage it. Meaning, we thought we had to do this, but we'll make it right and tell Norris to let you past. Norris, meanwhile, gets told around the time of Piastri's stop, quote, we'd like to reestablish the order at your convenience, which, as it turns out, what's convenient for Norris is not necessarily convenient for McLaren. But before we get to all of that, Verstappen pits on lap 50 for new medium tires, coming out in 5th behind Leclerc. And we get some more very angry Verstappen radio. We also get some more Norris radio. His engineer says, we do want to let Oscar through. Norris says, shouldn't we have boxed him first then? Engineer says it doesn't matter. Norris says, I mean, it does to me, maybe.
Maybe. Maybe is the word here.
Yeah. Lap 57, Verstappen gets by Leclerc with DRS on the front straight for 4th place, on his way to chasing down Hamilton for that final podium spot. And does reach Hamilton on lap 63 of 70. And as both are heading down the front straight into turn 1, Hamilton catches a slipstream behind the back marker of Albon, then moves around Albon to the inside and rejoins the racing line, while Verstappen dives to the inside from way back, locks up at the apex, and then drifts into Hamilton, who bumps Verstappen's rear left with his front right, launching Verstappen briefly into the air, and then shunting him off track while Hamilton continues on.
Remarkable that both cars
Yes.
kept going. Should we litigate this one for a second? I'm sure we'll talk about the rest of the stuff in totality maybe at the end, but I feel like Albon sort of forces Verstappen's hand a little bit here, just with Hamilton going around him and then pulling back into the driver's line. Max is also going around Albon off the driver's line, and it's right there. Like, the gap is right there. So, like, I guess that he went for it. Obviously, he sort of cooked it a little bit too far, and then the wheels weren't able to slow down properly enough, locked the front two, and I think he ended up locking the rears as well.
A lot of smoke.
A lot of smoke. Hamilton tries not to turn in. He does have to turn at a certain stage. So I know those people online saying like, "Oh, Hamilton said he didn't turn in, and look at him turn his wheel." It's like, that's not what we're talking.
There is a turn.
Yeah, there is a turn. There's a turn. What's he supposed to do? Like, what we're saying is he didn't turn into him to make the contact. He didn't crash into Verstappen to make that happen. Verstappen was the one that was cutting across his line. That's what they're saying. He didn't go into Verstappen's line, obviously. Pretty crazy that both cars managed to actually keep going from this. And yeah, not as high as Yuki's, but still a decent bang. And after the race, I think he refused to go to the medical center as well, even though some folks were saying he probably should. But yeah, not very happy. Just adding to his day, because by this stage, himself and Jean-Pierre Lambiase, who is GP, by the way. If you see people say GP, that's who they're referring to. I know I had some people on Twitter being confused because they couldn't Google who GP was because of the nature of GP.
Right.
Prix.
Yeah.
So, but his longtime engineer, the two of them were already feeling testy, and on this one, this was amazing. This call was amazing because this was the amount of times that the two of them are conspiring to create an alternative narrative that benefits them. And even finally at this stage, GP,
which everyone does,
could not. Yeah, which in fairness, everyone does, but they tend to quite a lot and be in the wrong quite a lot. I don't know. That's what it feels like to me, especially when it comes to incidents like this. Even at this stage, GP was done with Max's bullshit. He just couldn't. He was like, "No, I'm not going to do it."
He says twice because earlier, there's that incident at turn 3, and Max couldn't get around, and GP was like, basically, Max is saying, "Well, he didn't leave me a car's width," and GP was like, you were behind at the apex.
That's what he
And
said.
it's
You're
just
right.
that not carrying any water was so noticeable.
Yeah.
And it already, like, that angry message that Max gave. But the other thing is this: GP is often really passive aggressive with Max in a way that like would drive me. The thing that I can't, that is hard for me to project myself into about Red Bull, is I think that team is full of people who are deeply passive aggressive.
Yeah.
And the way they interact with each other is like nails on a chalkboard, where they all kind of seem unbearable, because GP was sort of saying like, you got to bring the tire in gently, etc. But it's hard to do that when the car is understeering. Like the nature of these cars, you got to really kind of like abuse them quite a bit to get them to respond, and just beat the hell out of the tires to bring them up, especially if it's prone to understeer. But like, so Max turns a lap that wasn't slow enough for GP, and Lambiase says, well, that's some gentle introduction, meaning to that stint. And that's where Max just flips out and says, don't give me that bullshit now. You guys gave me this fucking strategy. I'm trying to rescue what's left. And in fairness, at that moment, I kind of like, it was harsh, but I was kind of riding with Max on that one.
Yeah,
where it's
I
like,
agree.
the car won't turn. What do you want me to do?
Yeah, I agree. And I think I've always found, I think all of us probably have found the relationship between the two of them kind of hard to listen to sometimes, because I'm with you. I think GP is very passive aggressive, but then there's always that thing in the back of your head where you're like, well, maybe that's what Max needs. Max needs tough love. He is the son of Jos Verstappen. Like, maybe this is the type of thing that he reacts to. And if someone, if you're the empathetic engineer of Lewis Hamilton or someone, maybe it doesn't work as well. But this felt like we were listening in, like I was at a restaurant way too close to a couple who was
with a different couple. Yes, it's like when a couple starts fighting in front of you. Yeah, 100%. That was the vibe. Like, it was awkward, and then McLaren starts doing it too. There was something like, I think it was hot. Like, that's part of it. I think everyone was hot and like just like
Hungarian food is just bad
at the wit's end. Yeah, it was a weird thing, but it was the first time I've ever heard GP just kind of refuse to play along with Max anymore. And my suspicion is it'll be kind of an outlier that things like that happen. But
I don't know if it's relevant, and I am conscious of piling on Max here, but there was reports prior to this about him saying stuff that was like sort of complaining that certain people at Red Bull didn't have their heads screwed on enough, that weren't working hard enough. So I also wonder if, like, there's definitely some, we know now that there's just loads of weird interpersonal, inter-team conflict going on there. But for the longest part, he stayed out of it. He's been fairly sort of magnanimous about that in many ways. He hasn't gotten dragged into a fight. He hasn't picked a side. And when it comes to the team, he's fairly positive about them. Even in years past when they haven't been fighting at the top, he's not necessarily been like that. But last week he was saying like, oh, there's some people, and obviously they knew who those people are. So there might be some stuff going on that we don't know about as well going on. I don't know, but it was something to marvel.
Yeah. Well, before we get to the final, I guess, radio discussion of the race, we're going to take a quick break, but we will be right back. I also did want to just close out with the Hamilton Verstappen incident. What the stewards said, RaceFans has the ruling from them after the race. Quote, the stewards do not consider this to be the typical case of, quote, changing direction under braking, which was what Verstappen claimed over the radio. Although it is our determination that the driver of car 44, which is Hamilton, could have done more to avoid the collision. Accordingly, we determined that no driver was predominantly to blame and decided to take no further action.
Yeah.
Okay, so on to McLaren. Lap 67, Norris has still not given the place up to Piastri, and his engineer is trying everything he can think of to convince Norris to do it. I have I can put this in the show notes. The RaceFans has doing the Lord's work over there, compiling. Not only, I'll put both Verstappen and Norris or McLaren's radio messages to their drivers. So his engineer, his last name is Joseph, I think, says on different occasions, I know you'll do the right thing. Just remember every single Sunday morning meeting we have. You've proved your point. We did the stop sequence in this order for the good of the team. I'm trying to protect you, mate. I promise I'm trying to protect you. The way to win a championship is not by yourself. It is with the team. You're going to need Oscar and you're going to need the team. There is no threat behind. If there is a safety car now, it's going to make this very awkward. Please do it now.
This had the camber of like an ATF officer trying to convince somebody not to blow themselves up. It was like the most like, don't do this. Your family loves you. We can walk away. It was like really like appealing to his sense of decency. Like it wasn't, say threatening. It wasn't like, multi 21 Seb. It wasn't. It was very. Maybe in a certain degree, it was threatening. I think stuff that came out afterwards actually was probably a bit more threatening. But the radio messages themselves were really appealing to that. And it ended up putting him in this. Like it was a real. It felt like we were watching like a sort of a Paragon or. What's the other thing in Mass Effect? Renegade choice that Lando is going to take for the rest of his career. Was he going to keep it? Like I kind of thought he was, and in the end, he might have done the absolute worst version of both of these things.
It wasn't good. Like there's layers to it not being good. First of all. He's not that far. Like the weird thing is, because the season's so long, there's a moment where Max really felt like this thing was sewn up.
Yeah,
and like it's a few bit, especially if the McLaren, as it increasingly seems to be, is the best overall car on the grid, the most consistently like up in the placement. Like they are like. I think they're probably going to overtake Red Bull in the constructors. Like unless things really sharpen up with Sergio, who had a decent recovery drive this weekend. We shouldn't overlook that. But
which is it's easier to have a recovery drive when you've really shot the bed in qualifying.
It's true, but it's also not the easiest field to move through.
No, that's true.
Like
Hungary especially.
He did the job, or he did half the job, I guess. But half he did. He really did. But it does feel like Red Bull's probably not going to hang on to the Constructors' Championship if they are getting like firsts and seconds and sevenths with their two cars, and McLaren is getting podium. That's going to start to swing away from them. And really, even the drivers. Like, it'll take a lot. It would take a lot for Norris to close the gap with Max. But again, it's in the realm of like some lucky bounces, a DNF here. Arguably, again, Max should have had 2 DNFs by now.
Yeah.
That probably would have like changed the complexion of this. Like he's very lucky once again to escape the brush with Hamilton, with only losing a position. So, I'm not sure it's unreasonable for Norris to be like, why aren't we prioritizing me? Because through no fault of his own, Piastri's not in that. He's not in that horse race, really.
Yeah.
It just hasn't. The season hasn't like the cards haven't fallen that way. So I don't think Norris is necessarily in the wrong to ask like, why aren't we prioritizing me? And there is a bit of. Outside of the start, like Piastri did a lot of what he was asked, but when the pressure was on, when Norris was like turning really good lap times, Oscar wasn't. And to a degree, the way
he went off the track twice.
Pardon?
When he had to push, and he went off the track twice when he had to push.
There's a point where it's like, I'm sorry, if you could catch him or even get with incredible striking distance, this would be a lot easier to justify. But unfortunately, here in the last stint of the race, Oscar's getting his ass kicked. And you'd say like that might be the wash. He's no longer in the clean air. I hear all that, but Norris didn't lose ground the same way that Oscar did when the positions were swapped. So there's another part of this that's like, I feel for Oscar. He was in a winning position, but I'm also sitting there being like, you kind of got to do it on track. And but that points me back to the thing. I'm curious what your guys' take is on all this. why do you think McLaren went into panic? Please don't do this. Think of the team. You have to. Yeah. Why did it become so personal so fast? Why did it have this weird, panicky, pleading personal thing with Lando in the pit wall?
Do you want to go first, Drew?
I mean, yeah. I don't know. I would surmise that it's just that they have a good thing going with their team dynamic and they don't want to mess it up.
Yeah.
And they want their drivers to continue to trust the team and obey orders.
I think also they are desperate for a 1-2. I think they came into this weekend, and certainly on Saturday night, the goal was 1-2. That was the goal. It had been a long time since it had happened. It's a track that's hard to overtake. It's going to be a tire strategy race. They kind of know that, but it's narrow. Chances are you can hold on to the lead. And I think I don't want to be overly critical of Lando here because I think McLaren are not used to being in this position. They're not used to racing at the front and the strategic calls you have to make when you're at the front and the sort of lack of indecision you need to have. And I also think Lando is not, experienced at being up here in the front either. And I think, that's a big part of it. What I think was ultimately the problem here is the sort of lack of maybe emotional maturity that he had that would enable him, either that or his lack of strategic thinking. Because what he did was, and we'll get to the end of the race, what he did was basically say no for most of the end of the race and then eventually hand the place back. I think you either have to say no and, be the mad dog and try and get those points for the championship, which I think is a legitimate. I think McLaren sort of in a way have flubbed this a bit. I think Rob is right. It's also very, very, very difficult to take somebody's first win away from them, especially when Lando was a driver who had the first win hoodoo over monkey on his back for a long time. I think in a way now Piastri is free of that, and that's great. So I'm doing a lot of caveating here.
Yeah.
But I think the other thing that Lando maybe should have done is give the place back and then have the rest of the race to get the place back again. Like he ended up burning 15, 20 laps, whatever it was, chatting over the radio. Give Piastri the place back. Piastri is not going to be comfortable. His tires are going. That's on the end of the third stint. He's now leading, so he can't see. He's not like eyeballing someone else's pace in front of him and has that little cushion. He's got to set the pace. He's got to be the guy, and you're coming up behind him in the other
just
fastest
like an
car.
overtake.
Just like an overtake, right? So everything goes back to overtake. So the whole thing, I know this is all benefit of hindsight, and that's the beauty of being on an F1 podcast, but there was another version. Like I was thinking about if this was Max or someone or Vettel, they either would have taken the place, not given it back, or they would have given it back and they would have fought. And Lando sort of being caught between the two, the angel and the devil on his shoulders, ended up sort of doing the worst version of both and kind of fucking the vibes for the teams 1-2, right?
Yeah. Go ahead, Rob.
But I kind of feel like the vibes were so bad from their side too. Like, I don't think the lack of composure coming from the pit wall, I think, is also a problem. I don't love that and this is what I'm just so curious what's going on in that team. When the radio messages have this tenor of like, you're not going to do this. You're not going to be a dirtbag weasel bastard. You're not going to do this. You wouldn't. No, you're not going to do this to us. You please don't do it. I do it. And it turns into a thing where it's like, you're kind of putting over the radio that we actually think you are this person. That we're actually really afraid that at the end of the day, you're out for yourself and you're willing to cut the team's throat to get what you want. And maybe that is true. And there's certainly been good F1 drivers who've, done well by that. And some have been undone by it. But I don't love that the radio message basically puts out on notice, yeah, we don't trust Lando. And does he show off the most maturity? No. But I do think the lack of composure from the pit wall also suggests a sort of immaturity in the entire program, which is to be expected. They're playing from winning positions, and they're freaking out. They will get better at this. But I don't know. It just feels like he harshed the vibe, yes. I think they also really screwed up with the panicky pit stop. And then the you can't win with a team, buddy. Don't just think of all the Sunday mornings, our little team brunches. Don't those mean something to you? It doesn't leave you feeling good about that one too.
No, and the only person who kept their cool during this entire thing was Oscar Piastri. He did not overly complain over the radio.
No,
he asked a simple question. They gave a response. He did his drive.
Drove off the track a couple times, but
he didn't. Yeah. He stuck the landing, and then he didn't bring it up too much afterwards either.
In fact, he even said, I'm sorry I made this more difficult by not being faster.
Right, yeah. So his stoicism, and honestly, his sort of lack of emotion.
He is Australian by way of Finland, it seems.
Okay, yeah. I find to be terrifying because, Alain Prost shoo me to a certain extent whenever things were going right. He seems clinical in that way. And this probably isn't going to be his final win. Spoilers.
Yeah. Well, yes. As you alluded, Danny, at the beginning of lap 68, finally, Norris does pull over on the straight and allows Piastri by to take the win. And Norris himself didn't seem too heated in the post-race interviews or the green room. And maybe there's a reason for that. RaceFans has a good quote here from this article. After the race, Norris said, he never intended to deny Piastri victory. He only intended to wait until the last moment, and said he didn't need to give the team any indication what he had planned. Quote, I know what I'm going to do and what I'm not going to do, he said afterwards. Of course, I'm going to question it and challenge it, and that's what I did. I was going to wait until the last lap, the last corner. But then they said if there was a safety car all of a sudden and I couldn't let Oscar go through, then it would have made me look like a bit of an idiot. Then I was like, yeah, it's a fair point, and I let him go with 2 laps to go or something.
Is he not a school of Formula One? Does he not know that the last time that happened, they got rid of team orders for 15 years? Does he not remember? It's Massa and Schumacher. Or Barrichello. Sorry, was it Barrichello? It was Barrichello, wasn't it?
And that's the one that creates the sea change. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Now you have to pretend you're not giving team orders.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. Can I? There's one thing I really want to complain about.
Please.
They need to stop using this drones for F1.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Oh my god. The fucking hairpin drone.
Which you're thinking, right? You're thinking, oh, they put the drone there because obviously the cars slows down to a certain extent, and you also have kind of 2 turns they can go over. But unfortunately, the helipad for the emergency helicopters is next on the inside of the final turn. So drones are not allowed to fly over that. And then presumably they probably don't want them flying over the grandstands either. So it just shows you this.
Or the track, yeah.
Yeah, this random little bit, and the entire time the drone is trying to catch up because it's a Formula One car. It's the fastest racing cars in the world.
And also them putting so much English, like it's gonna be an exciting shot. And this thing's banking and twisting and turning, and it's like,
I wonder if they can even, if that's just a factor of how it has to look, or if they could gimbal it. They could probably gimbal it. I would appreciate them gimbling it.
Dude, I'm not motion. I do not get motion sick watching stuff. But the 3rd or 4th time they went to that shot, I was like, I could deal with less of this.
Do the Formula E thing. Just have the camera tied to a wire, like a spider cam. You know what I mean? Like they used to do that in Formula E. That was all right.
I mean, they do that a lot. They do that at Silverstone. They do, yeah.
I guess they do.
I guess
there's
not enough space on the track for, because the other thing is this: we've seen the shot way better with a crane. With a camera on a boom arm.
Jib. Yeah.
It looked like that shot looks amazing. Yeah, with a jib operator, like controlling it, brings together the movement and the angular momentum of the car. It looks great.
You can zoom. You can make dynamic by having a
cars
zoom
look
lens
so
on
far
there.
away from that drone. It's like they're just gone, and then they drive under that. They drive under the overpass.
Yes, you miss it. Yeah,
you can't even see them.
so stupid. So stupid.
All right. Well, Oscar Piastri wins his first race, the 7th different winner this year, and the 115th different winner in F1. Yes, from the top 3 teams, the only one who hasn't won a race is Sergio Perez.
Oh my God. I mean, he's got one race left to save his seat at this stage. He is. I don't know. I said it was crazy when they gave him that extension. At the time they gave it as well, I thought it was completely insane, and it's just been a disaster ever since. It's very strange.
Yeah. Let's see. Lando Norris in second. Lewis Hamilton holds on to third place for his second podium in a row. Charles Leclerc fourth. Max Verstappen fifth. After that contact with Hamilton, he never got past Leclerc after he let him through. Carlos Sainz sixth. Sergio Perez seventh, up from 16th place. And behind him, George Russell in 8th, up from 17th. Also gets the fastest lap. Yuki Tsunoda 9th, and then Lance Stroll in 10th. And apparently there was a similar thing going on in that team between Stroll and Alonso. Stroll, however, did not move over for Alonso.
Funny. Wow.
Yes.
Wow. I'm sure that's going to make a great weekend for Alonso even more fun.
Oh, yeah. To take the final points-paying position. Fernando Alonso, 11th place, 0 points. Behind him, Daniel Ricciardo, Nico Hulkenberg, Alex Albon, Kevin Magnussen in 15th, then Valtteri Bottas, Logan Sargent, Esteban Ocon, Zhou Guan Yu, and then Pierre Gasly, who was a DNF, retired with a hydraulic leak after 33 laps.
Wow.
And that's the Hungarian Grand Prix. Boy, howdy.
Ermagerd.
Let's take it to the news. Rob, speaking of, I don't know, Formula One?
Disasters. So, and I don't think this is the disaster. I think it's cleaning up from a disaster. But
this is great news. This is great news.
So, when last we saw Mattia Binotto, he was explaining to Gunther how good it is to get fired. And I hope Gunther took a lot of comfort from that, but I hope Gunther hadn't made plans like, I'm going to spend so much, like, Mattia and I are going to get so close, we're going to be hanging out.
He bought the villa
like,
next
in his
door.
Vineyards. Yeah, exactly. Look, it's just, like, man, two unemployed team principals just kicking it in the wine country. Because Mattia is now taking over Sauber, the entire F1 effort for Audi, which controls the Sauber team. But this brings us to kind of all the weirdness behind the situation, stuff that I hadn't really been aware of until I saw it spelled out in the Autosport sort of behind the scenes on what happened here. So, to catch you up a little bit, so Audi like made plans to acquire Sauber. And the key thing was they didn't just want to slap an Audi badge on a Sauber for obvious reasons, but they were going to have a big splashy, like, Audi is here in 2026 with the new regulations and an Audi powertrain. We're coming in the sport as a proper works team. So they also appointed Andreas Seidel, formerly of McLaren, but also has some background with the VW group, which Audi is a part of. They appointed him in 2019 to sort of oversee their F1 effort. And then in the early part of this year, he was made the CEO of Audi's F1 program, which is kind of a weird title move because I thought he was already kind of running it. Except there was someone else in the picture. Also, there was an Audi executive, Oliver Hoffman, was also operating as chairman of Sauber. And apparently Seidel and Hoffman both thought that they should be in control of the program and started engaging in a power struggle, which began to come to a head, or at least it was highlighting the degree to which it's a crisis, when they couldn't sign a driver. After Hülkenberg, they couldn't land signs. And that was I remember we were talking about it. Like, it's kind of weird. This is a team that should have, again, a works team is coming in, a major automotive brand is coming in. Why doesn't Sainz want this seat? And our theory was kind of like, well, the Sauber of it all doesn't seem good. But it kind of goes beyond that. It was just an indication that from what he could observe of the team, it didn't seem like they were ready for prime time. And apparently, according to the Autospot article, it also kind of it echoed a lot of things that the Audi Sauber effort has been hitting when it tries to acquire technical staff. People are not joining that team. They're not joining that company. And it turned into a real, like, okay, something's really wrong. The vibes are off. Now, a big part of it was because Audi decided to do this half in, half out thing for the last couple of years. The old owner of Sauber was still in there, Finn Rausing. But it's kind of like they've done a leaseback thing where, like, he'd sold the house but was still living in it. And then Audi was like, hey, why is the car could you please invest more in the racing team? And he was like, no. Basically, no, I've sold it. I'm not. Why would I invest more in your car? I'm not going to do that. So this is why Audi kind of had to step in early this year and take the team over. And really a lot of this stemmed from Seidel's understanding of where the effort should be was 2026 is all that matters.
Right.
For all we care, that car can catch fire in the garage every week. Not really relevant to what we're trying to do, which is build a competitive program for 2026. But in the meantime, everyone still involved with the team is like, you kind of got to run a decent team. And also, it just looks bad to have everyone kind of knows it's Audi's team. To have them suck this badly isn't a good look. We need to step this up. So, you have these two executives fighting, like staking out these two positions. And Audi, I guess, sliced the Gordian knot by firing both of them and bringing in Mattia Binotto to oversee the entire program. And then putting Audi CEO Gernot Dollner as chairman of the board of directors over at Sauber. So, like, now it's complete control. Like, Sauber is answerable to Audi, and then the entire program is being overseen by Mattia Binotto. Crucially, not stepping in to be team principal, as far as we can tell. One of his priorities is to find a team principal to take over day-to-day operations there. But he is there to basically be a higher level guy, a bit more, I don't know, maybe like Jean Todt at Ferrari in his latter days, but sort of operate in that role rather than day-to-day operations in charge of the pit wall, which is probably where Binotto, the impression I always had was Binotto's deficiencies became visible in the team principal role, especially when it came to the sort of the cut and thrust of a race weekend and how he handled fallout from like just the friction of F1 racing. But by all accounts, enormously gifted engineer, enormously gifted administrator of engineering programs. Just not an amazing like field general for a racing team. So Audi appointing him for this makes an absolute ton of sense. But it also kind of feels like, that Seidel, that's kind of what Seidel wanted to do. That's kind of what it feels to me, right? It's like Seidel was like, you need one guy to run this. Let me run it. Let's set a strategy. And they didn't. And then to solve the problem that Audi's kind of half-in, uncommitted approach took, they just kind of cleaned house, which, it goes that way sometimes.
So is he going to stick around? Is this like a transitional thing, or do you think he's going to stick around for a while in this position?
Binotto. I think he's sticking around.
Binotto, he's sticking around. Do you think this might have anything to do with coaxing Sainz over? I
saw some chat. It's an interesting notion. It might be because he gave Sainz his opportunity. That was a Binotto move. But also, I think Sainz is one of the people who pretty publicly lost confidence in the team under Mattia. And so I'm not sure if the thinking was that there's that affinity between them. I think it's possible that Sainz has a great deal of respect for Mattia, but I think it is a bit of a stretch to say he has a nostalgia for wanting to go and work for him again. But he's in a different role. And, if your issue was I liked half of what he did and then race day I wasn't happy, well, he's not going to be there on race day.
Yeah.
Well, if he needs a team principal, I know a certain northern Italian who is out of a job.
Oh, my God.
Oh, could you imagine? No,
Quite
the world
Netflix
is not kind
famous
enough for that.
Can you? Oh my
Netflix,
God! Please,
star of Formula One, the movie.
Please let the next season of Drive to Survive have Mattia awkwardly fending off, like Gunther trying to sound him out for a job. So you probably need a good team principal. Yeah.
Well, speaking of the good old Haas days, it appears they are over for one Kevin Magnussen.
Oh.
Yeah, the team had announced in previous episodes of this podcast, which is where they do all their announcing, that they are hiring Oliver Behrman to be on the team after Nico Hülkenberg left for Sauber/Audi. But they have not yet named a second driver, only that Kevin Magnussen will not be with the team. I hear there's an opening at Sauber.
I feel like we're saying goodbye to Kevin Magnussen. I think that's...
You think so? I think there is one too many seats now, or one too many drivers for the seats. Rumor is at Haas is Ocon, although he had a seat fitting at Williams to do some testing there. So
yeah, he's definitely the second best driver at Haas at the moment, and he seems, I don't know. I think, when you can tell where some of them are fighting tooth and nail to stay in the sport, and some of them seem like maybe they've got other stuff going on now. They got family stuff. They got kids. You know what I mean? I wouldn't be surprised if Magnussen he's been in the sport for a long time. Like
they've tried to kill him before, twice, and it didn't take.
And he's got he's not going to win a championship. He's not going to make a transition to a team that's going to do that. I don't think he's anything left to prove otherwise. And the seasons are only getting longer, and he's aging out as well to a certain extent. So I wouldn't be surprised if he is, hasn't got that fight to stick around and is probably happy to say goodbye at this stage. I don't know.
I don't know. He gave such a fangs out performance this year. Like, is he the best qualifier? No. Have the race day performances been there as much as they have been there in the past? No. Like, this year, decisively, Hülkenberg has been the better of the two. But Magnussen's commitment to the team, just nothing's off the table. Like, he will run through walls for Haas.
Yeah.
The other thing that I think does puzzle me a little bit here is that I feel like with Ocon, you're going to be getting, and it seems like it's pretty close to a done deal. It seems like there's very strong indications that it's going to be Ocon being paired with Ollie Behrman. I feel like you're getting the absolute worst traits of Magnussen at his most toxic a few years ago.
Right.
And I guess the upshot is you're probably also getting a much better driver, like someone with faster pace. So maybe that's going to mask all sins. But if kind of your gamble is Behrman is our guy of the future, oh man, I wouldn't throw him onto a team with Ocon, a guy who just has gotten
drive him
into
into the
every
ground.
fucking teammate.
Yeah.
Yeah. He learned. I learned from you, Dad. He looks up at Alonso and says,
well, speaking of tumult, Rob, what's going on with Renault / Alpine?
So, a couple headlines today. One is that, and a lot of this is being pushed by one Flavio Briatore, who's sort of been brought in too. And I think what is becoming clear is some of these, we're bringing in Flavio to sort of set the direction of the team. It might also be the way you bring in consultants to do things that
you're going to do anyway.
Yeah, but you just don't want to be the person with your fingerprints on like the bloody knife. Yeah. So headlines are first that Renault is launching a study on their engine facility as part of a broader review of their entire F1 project. But this comes after strong rumors circulated that they were going to abandon their engine program, which to a degree has yielded really bad results. Like it is, these are engines supposed to have complete parity. And with years of advance warning, Renault didn't build an engine that's as fast as everyone else's. And like to a degree, I understand how you get to a point where it's like, maybe we got to just like wrap this thing up. But they're looking at wrapping this thing up, but that's going to mean shutting down a facility that employs a lot of French engineers. So there's hurdle number one. And number two, look, once you got a program like this, it's not like you can turn around and be like, I kind of wish we kept our engine program. Once these things are ripped apart, like they're gone. To restart it requires basically like a full like recapitalized investment in going back in ground floor.
I wonder if doing the study is a required step in France.
Oh, maybe
before shutting it down.
Publicly owned company as well.
Yeah,
that's a fair point.
So the other part of this is, by all accounts, Alpine have negotiated a possible path forward with Mercedes, where they basically turn into another Aston Martin team, where they take the entire powertrain from Mercedes, throw it in the back of the car, and I think the rear wing is still designed, but like all the powertrain components and a lot of like the rear chassis, all that stuff is pretty much like copy pasted from Mercedes,
right?
And so that'll be the direction that Alpine goes, and you'd argue that the results have been bad, and they might be better off adopting what was once called like the tracing point approach.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
They might be better served by that, but I do think, I don't know, for me, there's a prestige element. It just feels embarrassing to be Renault and to be at a point where it's like, engines, who needs them? Designing a third of our car. Fuck it.
French company going to the Germans.
Germans and Brits. It's just a national nightmare of you're having you couldn't do it here, so you had to go to a bunch of British engineers working for a German company, and basically ask them to just start like building a third of your car for you. And it seems like this maybe is necessary for Alpine to survive, because patience at the corporate level is thinner for this project than it's been. So we got to bring cost down, and we need it to be less embarrassing along the way. So let's just start buying our cars pre-built.
Well, speaking of being less embarrassing, Danny, final thought here. Final story.
Yeah, just a quick one. Any sort of I guess one of the load-bearing walls of whether or not Max Verstappen might leave Red Bull was this apparent secret underneath the nose of Christian Horner contract line that they had, where if Helmut Marko were to go, it would open up the door for Verstappen to leave. Obviously, there's been lots of other developments in the meantime, but this isn't confirmed by anyone, but Autosport basically have sources that say that Marko has now signed a document that guarantees that he will see out his current contract with the team that currently runs until the end of 2026, which seems like a weird thing to sign. It's like, we have a contract, but now I'm signing an extra layer of that contract that says I will not break that contract. But apparently that's the case. So if he's not leaving, that doesn't necessarily mean that Max can't leave, but it means that the break clause that apparently is in his contract will not get triggered, apparently. But who knows? Who knows what's going on in Red Bull? I've stopped trying to figure it out at this stage. Helmut Marko is still a threat.
Indeed. Also a threat, Spa-Francorchamps. Danny, please introduce us to the racetrack in Belgium.
I guess I can't do Ermagerd for everyone. Spa is F1 royalty, folks. This is it's a banger. It's up there. It's one of the most iconic Formula One tracks. Not just because we love Belgium. We love those pommes frites. We love the Broja Frikandel. It's not just because of that. It's not just because there's good races here. And because we've had it on the calendar since the very start, since 1950. Although they were racing out here since 1921, back when it was twice as long. This used to be a 14.9 kilometer track through the Ardennes forest in Belgium, where the Battle of the Bulge took place. It's not just because of that. It's also because it just looks different to every F1 track, and it is different in the same way we love Suzuka, because it just looks different. It's a great track, but also it's just like, yeah, look at that, man. That's Japan. That's Suzuka. And when they're doing all the stuff in Spa, it's a great track. It's got lots of long straights. It's got lots of high speed corners, but the whole thing just looks great. It's just like an adventure into the woods. It's got some iconic tracks or corners on it, of course. Eau Rouge, Radion Eau Rouge is the name of the river that runs underneath. I think it's red. Eau is French for water, and Rouge is French for red. So there you go, red water. A corner that has been profiled in recent years, mostly down to a number of tracks, terrible crashes we've had there, some fatal in recent years. The current layout of the track is 44 laps. It's basically the same layout as they changed in 1979 when they did half it from that initial 15-kilometer track. It's 4.44 laps, and that means it's 4.4 miles, apparently, which is 7 kilometers. It's hilly as well. Plenty of topographical change on this one. Sector 2 is essentially a toboggan run down the back end of this hill that the track is on, and Sector 3 is a slow climb back up to almost the top. And the other thing that happens here a lot is weather. We tend to get a lot of different types of weather. It's up in the mountains, it's quite high, and it's on a hill, so you get a little bit of relief rain as the clouds struggle to reach over the top of the hillside there and dump some of their delicious water, which I'm sure Drew will let us know in a second how that all goes. Some memorable moments, though, folks. The book, do we even have the book here? I don't have the book here. Oh, no, it's over there. But don't worry, in 1960, we had 2 driver fatalities on the same race weekend, which has only ever happened one other time, which we talk about often, which is Roland Ratzenberger and Ayrton Senna at Imola. Chris Bristow hit an embankment of mud that was about 4 feet tall. This is on the old track, and died. Alan Stacey got hit by a bird, which does not happen very often, in his Lotus. And just a reminder of how insanely awful F1 crashes used to be. Got trapped in a burning car when it flew into the woods and perished that way. So there you go. 1990. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, just in case the book gives us a freebie this week, I wanted to make sure we got one in there. 1988 was 1998, a race that I was watching live as a 12-year-old and could not believe that it was live because it looked like I tuned into one of those craziest crashes in motorsport history videos. This was the crash where David Coulthard lost it on the exit of turn, or on the way up, I guess, on the exit of turn 1. And there was $13 million worth of cars damaged. Like, it's just, you should watch the start of the 1998 Spa Grand Prix. It is ridiculous. Like, basically the entire field is just like comes out of the mist, and they're just like parts of cars are just moving. It's like a tsunami of car parts. Hilariously, upon the restart, Johnny Herbert and Mika Hakkinen also crashed, leading to another incident that year. Other less crash-y highlights in 2000 was the famous Mika Hakkinen double overtake over Michael Schumacher and I forget who else it was, with 3 laps left to win the championship. In 2004, Schumi won his 7th championship. He came second, but it was enough to win because he had won 12 of the previous 13 races that year. It was a crazy race with lots of nuts crashes that was eventually won by a relatively young Kimi Räikkönen. We had 2012, just to get back to the crashes. This was where Grosjean did his Leroy Jenkins at the start of the race and took out half the field. He got a €50,000 penalty and a 1 race ban. He is the only driver in like 30 something years, I think, of F1 to have gotten a race ban. This was the one where he
insta-banned.
Yeah, he caught the edge of Hamilton.
Oh yeah,
took them both out. They all went to Alonso was in it, Maldonado was in it, everyone was in it. Maldonado was in a crash that he wasn't to blame for. So
you can't stop
that's
Phoenix, though. You just can't stop ban. Exactly. He's gonna come back stronger.
2019 is where Charles Leclerc had his first ever win, so that was pretty cool. And then 2021 was the only race in Formula One history with 0 green flag laps. This was the 2-lap race at Spa that Verstappen won by default because he got pole position.
Second saddest thing after the Indy were only like 6 cars started, right? Like that's up there.
Yes, you're right.
What are we doing here?
In terms of like worst fan experience in particular, like on like person, like literally there were so few cars running that year in America that you could hear the boos over the sounds of the engines. But you have to feel for the folks who trundled all the way up to the top of the Ardennes forest, sat there in the rain for hours upon hours, only to watch the safety car go around twice and then call it for half points. So, I mean, they did change the rules after that, although it doesn't exactly help the fans. So, hopefully, Spa's always a bit more fun with a bit of weather, but hopefully not too much weather.
Well, Danny, I'm glad you asked. At race time, qualifying time here, 4 p.m. local, we've got relatively cool temps, 61 degrees Fahrenheit or 16 Celsius, with a moderate wind, 7 miles an hour at 11 kilometers an hour out of the west. Precipitation, though, 75%.
Oh, give it to me.
On qualifying day. That drops, however, to 7% on race day. Temperatures a little higher, 66 degrees Fahrenheit or 19 Celsius, and even lighter wind. We're looking at 5 miles an hour or 8 kilometers an hour. So, but this is a microclimate here, so anything can happen at any time. Just like the Formula One season, Max Verstappen is on top of the driver's standings, followed by Lando Norris now with 189 points. Verstappen's got 265. Charles Leclerc is in third with 162. Sainz in fourth with 154. Then Piastri now in fifth with 149. Then we've got Hamilton with 125. Perez has 124. Russell is in eighth place with 116. And then a jump down to Alonso in ninth with 45. His teammate Stroll in 10th with 24. Hülkenberg and Tsunoda are tied with 22. Ricciardo's got 11. Behrman and Gasly both have 6 points. Wow. Kevin Magnussen has 5. Albon has 4. Ocon has 3. And Zhou, Sargent, and Bottas all have 0 points. In the constructor standings, Red Bull Racing is still on top for the time being with 389 points. McLaren is in a close second with 338. So what's that? Doing live math is bad for me. 51 points.
Sure.
Ferrari's in third with 322 points. Mercedes in fourth with 241. Aston Martin in fifth with 69. Red Bull Racing in sixth. I'm sorry, Red Bull Honda. That's the RB.
RB.
Trip me up again. RB's in sixth with 33 points. Gene Haas and team are in seventh with 27. Alpine is in eighth with 9 points. Williams has 4, and Sauber has 0. If you'd like to join the standings yourself, you can do so using the link to join our official Shift+F1 Fantasy League. From the Hungarian Grand Prix, here is the podium. In third place, Danny Rick Tattoo Shop. In second place, Very Cool and Real Brands.
Nice. I like it.
And In first place, drive and survive.
Well, it's a weak name, but you won. So, who's laughing?
Overall, though, Hoster Class in Motion is in third place. In second place, RBs, We Have the Meats. And in first, The Fast of Us Part 2.
Oh, that's good. Love it.
If you'd like, you can send us an email, shiftf1podcast@gmail.com or f1.cool/emails. You can also hit us up on the socials, which are linked in the show notes. That's us around the internet. Should we take it around the world, Danny?
Let's race around the world. Yeah.
Kind of not a lot happening out there in the racing world. Formula 2 and Formula 3 will indeed be supporting Formula 1 at Spa-Francorchamps.
Wow. We got
Indeed.
They were in Hungary as well. I guess it's pretty close. Well, it's not that close, actually.
Moving the whole circus.
Yeah.
The World Rally Cross Championship this week is in Hungary at the Nirad Racing Center for the World Rally Cross of Hungary.
Nirad.
We've got the NHRA is in scenic Sonoma, California the Denso Sonoma Nationals. Danny,
I was gonna go.
Go watch.
I was gonna go, but I'm going to. I'm flying to SoCal to watch Arsenal play Manchester United in SoFi on Saturday. So I will be back on Sunday. So I could, but also I've not seen my wife and child in 2 weeks because I was in Estonia and they're on the East Coast. So I'm already leaving to go to see a soccer match hours after they get back. I can't also go to the I don't want to get divorced.
Well, if you do go, do take ear protection. I once went to a drag race at Sonoma back, I think when it was called Sears Point. It was the loudest thing I have ever heard in my life.
Okay.
Yes.
And you've heard Formula 1 cars.
Yes, and Indy cars and NASCARs.
Right. God, that's wild.
It was incredible.
I had a friend who was driving Sonoma with his buddies. They did Laguna Seca the week previous. It's like that time of year where you rent a track with like all of the guys. And he was telling me how the whole day went, and it was just rich person crashing their car. There was like another group of Richies there. They have their own kit cars that they build themselves. There was another crew, and it was like insane. The stories you tell of people wrapping like two Lotuses wrap themselves around each other. Yeah, and some 18-year-old in a Miata like tanked it on turn 12 and like totally bombed. Yeah, so I was like, that's an expensive pastime.
Yes. And finally here, second to last, we've got a race in the Ardennes. We've also got a race, the Motocross Grand Prix of Flanders.
I was about to say, was it on the D-Day beaches or what are we going for here?
In Lommel, Belgium.
Beautiful.
Yes.
That's a World War One, sort of more so, I feel
it sure is. And then Formula One, maybe you've heard of it. July 26th, Free Practice 1 kicks off at 7:30 a.m. Eastern Time on ESPN2, followed by Free Practice 2 at 11 a.m. on ESPNU. Saturday, July 27th, Free Practice 3 is at 6:30 a.m. on ESPN2, followed by qualifying at 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific on ESPN2. And the race, everyone, Sunday, July 28th at 9 a.m. Eastern on ESPN. That's what's going on this weekend. Danny?
Nobody dies, but this might be the most insane paragraph I've ever read in my life.
All right.
So I just want to say, if you've got children, nobody's going to die. If you've children listening to this podcast, cover their ears right now because we're about to go some places. Okay?
Oh boy! All right.
Okay. On this day, July 24th, you're making me do it. Oh my God! Let's see if I can get through this. Here we go. Today in 1938, a young British aristocrat racer named Dick Seaman. Dick Seaman won the German Grand Prix at the Nürburgring driving a Mercedes-Benz watched by Hitler.
Oh, fuck. Don't worry, Adolf. I got balls big enough for both of us.
Oh, God. All right, I'm 2 sentences in. There's way more of this. The young Brit, who was given a country estate for his 20th birthday, was no Nazi, but simply wanted to win, and so signed to drive for the Nazi-funded Mercedes team. He was the first Englishman to win a major Grand Prix since Major Henry Seagrave in 1923. On the podium, he gave a Nazi salute. Dick Seaman gave a Nazi salute.
Well,
but said, "I only wish it had been a British car." A year later, he was killed while pushing too hard at Spa. Sorry, I guess I didn't read that part. Hitler sent an enormous wreath, and Mercedes still tends to his grave to this day.
Well,
we may as well never do another one because I don't think you can top that.
We're never beating this. Mr. Führer, Dick Seaman has perished at Spa. Dick Seaman, the Englishman who did the Nazi salute? Yes, mein Führer. Send him an enormous wreath.
Are you writing the script for one of those recuts of Downfall?
Yeah, exactly, right? We should do the Dick Seaman. Oh my God. Okay. Anyway, sorry, there is another one, but let me just get through it. Ageism is rife in sport. And in 1966, there was much newspaper speculation that 40-year-old Jack Brabham was too old to be a serious challenger for the World Championship today at the Dutch GP at Zandvoort. Jack limped to his car with the aid of a stick while supporting a false beard, much to the paddock's amusement. Good job. Needless to say, he had the last laugh when he not only won the race, but also took the championship that season. He carried on racing until 1970. And presumably never got a wreath from Hitler. So that's another W for Jack Brabham.
I feel like giving the Nazi salute it's like, man, you're just too thirsty for this gig. You didn't have to do that. Like, I think everyone understands, like, yeah, no, the Mercedes ride was open. You do, it's your job, it's your calling. But being like, I just want the Führer to know how much I appreciate the party's backing.
You watch, you read the stories about like British Nazi sympathizers. They all tend to be aristocrats. So perhaps a 20-year-old who got an estate for his birthday he was probably right in the crosshairs of, folks who were, got Mein Kampf for Christmas and thought it was a interesting read.
Okay, let's end this show.
The fact that he's called Dick Seaman is like the least messed up.
I'm sorry. We need to remake Remains of the Day, but it's about being Dick Seaman's butler.
Oh my God.
Oh man. Okay. Dare I ask for final thoughts, Danny?
No, I'm just gonna.
All right.
No,
Rob.
Sorry, it's just all I've got is a head full of Dick Seaman.
Well, okay. If you'd like to support the show and get access to all of our bonus episodes, the ad-free version of the podcast, and the official Shift+F1 Discord, you can do so over at patreon.com/ShiftF1. Have a good race weekend, everyone. We will see you all next week.
Yum.